My turn.
Well, hello out there on the internet. Welcome back to In Response, a Magic the Gathering channel focused on the rules and interactions of this game we love. My name is TS, and in this episode, we're going to go through a full turn from beginning to end and every step and phase in between. Along the way, we're going to talk about what actions you can take, and in some cases, you must take. Through each step and phase, there's going to be a few terms that I'm going to use, and I'd like to go ahead and introduce those to you now. The first one is the stack. The stack is how the game organizes different effects that try to happen throughout the course of the game. Maybe there's an effect that happens and a player would like to respond to it. Or maybe there's multiple effects that all try to happen at the same time. The stack is how the game organizes those effects and decides the order in which they resolve. You're also going to hear me talk about priority. Priority is how the game decides whose turn it is to put an effect on the stack, whether it's your turn or if it's your opponent's turn. Very little will happen without you having priority, or an opportunity to put something onto the stack. Lastly, you're going to hear me mention state-based actions. This is basically a moment before any player can get priority, where the game can clean up some effects. If there's a creature that has lethal damage marked on it, state-based actions will tell that creature to go to the graveyard. And there's other things that can happen as well. Now, as always, for every rule that we cover, I want you to remember to follow it with the phrase, unless a card says otherwise. There are always exceptions to these rules, but for now, we're going to keep it pretty straightforward and simple. So, with all of that out of the way, let's head into our turn. So let's begin our example turn with a game already in progress. This way we have more resources to use, more options available. At the beginning of the turn, we're going to go ahead and untap all of our permanents. This could be lands, creatures, artifacts, anything that was tapped before the turn started, untaps now. After that, we're going to check for upkeep triggers. We don't have any right now. So we're going to go ahead into our draw step. We're going to take one card from the top of our library, put it into our hand. After that, we move into our pre-combat main phase, or as you're more likely to hear it, main phase 1. During that main phase, I'm going to play this land, this forest here. I'm going to go ahead and tap that forest to show that I'm making 1 green mana. With that green mana, I'm going to play my Fyndhorn Elves. This creature has a mana ability which can generate mana on its own, but we can't use it this turn because of summoning sickness. We'll get into more detail about that later. Now, with 4 untapped lands still available to me though, I have some options. I have a couple of cards in my hand that I could play, but I don't have to do everything right now. What I'm going to do is move into combat, see how that turns out, and then make a more informed decision afterwards. So, I'm going to let my opponent know I'm ready to move to combat. If they don't have any responses, we go to our combat phase. We go to the beginning of combat step, check for triggers. There are none. And I'm going to go to declare attackers. Now, if I attack with any or all of my creatures, I have to declare them all at once. I can't declare an attack with this Sabertooth Mauler, wait to see how my opponent responds, and then declare another creature. I have to say it all or nothing right now. So, the way that's going to work is I am going to tap my Sabertooth Mauler to show him attacking. I will not attack with my giant spider. I'm going to hold that back just in case I need a good creature to block later. If I was in a multiplayer game, I would have to say who each of my creatures is attacking. Since I'm in a 1 versus 1 game, that's not really necessary since I cannot attack myself. It's understood that I'm attacking my opponent. Unlike some games, I cannot attack their creatures directly, so it's assumed I am attacking my opponent. Then we pass priority, see if any players have responses. Once priority is passed, responses are resolved, which for right now, to keep it simple, there's no responses there. We go to declare blockers. Now, just like in the declare attacker step, my opponent has to declare all of their blockers at the same time. They don't have to block with anything or everything, they could block with nothing. But for this example, my opponent has a 3/3 creature of their own, and they are going to block my 3/3 Sabertooth Mauler. Since they both have 3 power and 3 toughness, they will deal damage equal to each other's toughness, and both creatures will likely die during combat. So it looks like my opponent would rather us both lose a creature than for them to take damage themselves. But this is why I kept untapped lands available. After my opponent has declared blockers, I'm going to use 2 green mana as we pass priority, and it's my opportunity to do so, and I'm going to play Titanic Growth to give my Sabertooth Mauler a temporary +4/+4 bonus that lasts until the end of the turn. Once that spell resolves, I'm going to take the card and put it in the graveyard, but the effect is going to assume to stay on the creature all the way through the rest of this turn. I don't need to put anything physical on the table, but if I need a reminder and my opponent agrees that it's a substantial reminder, I can put something down. Now we go to damage. My 7/7 eats my opponent's 3/3 like it was nothing. My creature survives, theirs does not, but the block still prevented me from connecting with my opponent's life total. So, that 3/3 did accomplish its task. After combat, we check for any end of combat triggers, and since there are none, we go into our second main phase. This is the post-combat main phase, but you'll most likely hear it as main phase 2. Now, if I hadn't used that 2 mana for Titanic Growth, I have a creature in my hand that I could have played during this time, but I chose to keep my Sabertooth Mauler alive. You'll see why. Since I'm not doing anything right now in my second main phase, I'm going to move to my end step. My Sabertooth Mauler has an end step trigger that says if a creature died this turn, that Sabertooth Mauler gets a +1/+1 counter and untaps. Now, a +1/+1 counter is different than a regular bonus like Titanic Growth gave. Titanic Growth's effect will only last until the end of the turn. This +1/+1 counter will stay on that creature for as long as it's in play. My 3/3 will now be a 4/4 moving forward. And it untaps. After the end step triggers, we go to the cleanup step. This is where if I had more than 7 cards in my hand, I would choose cards to discard or go to the graveyard until I was down to 7. Any damage that was marked on my creatures now goes away, and any effects that said until end of turn now end. So that +4/+4 bonus that Titanic Growth gave is no longer affecting my Sabertooth Mauler. But remember, that +1/+1 counter will stay. That's the end of our turn, And now, my opponent gets to go through the same process. Well, there you have it. That's the big picture of what a turn looks like in Magic the Gathering. In our next episode, we're going to look at casting a spell, the different types of spells, when you're able to cast those spells, and the steps you go through to put that spell on the stack. So, until then, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.
Phenomenal cosmic power!